Hey everybody, I wanted to talk today about IMAG, or Image Magnification, which is kind of an industry term for basically just taking whatever's on camera and putting it up on a projector. I did a big event a couple weeks ago in San Diego, and we took my flight pack that I have here and the 2ME panel we had here. Kind of a minimal setup just because we were having to drive and we didn't have a ton of room. But we pulled off something that's actually pretty cool, and show you just kind of a brief little video clip of the setup that we had there. Unfortunately, I can't really show anything from the show itself. We don't have permission from the company that we're working for to do that. But I wanted to kind of go through some of the things that we did well, and some of the things that maybe could have done a little bit better. So, hindsight is always 2020. And after the fact, I thought of a couple things that I could do to make things a little bit better. So let me give you just a little bit of a kind of a overview of what the situation was like. So we had three cameras and we had three projection screens. So there's two screens on the side were projectors, and they were being fed by the same signal. And then we had an LED wall behind the stage, and we were feeding that with a different signal. So basically, what's going on? We had different presenters that were giving keynotes or giving talks, and whenever they had slides, we'd put those up on the two side projector screens, and we'd leave some sort of image on the LED wall as a background behind the speaker. Occasionally we would put up video on there. They had a number of videos that they wanted to be able to play, and whenever it came time for a video, we'd put the video up on all three screens simultaneously. But for the most part, the screen in the middle was left on some kind of image. We would try and change it up from time to time, so between different speakers we would change what image was going to that center LED wall screen. But for the most part, the screens on the side were used to either project the PowerPoint presentations or for IMAG, for basically taking the images that were fed from the various cameras. So on top of all of that, we actually had a number of video sources we had to include. So in addition to the three cameras and video playback, we also had two different video sources for PowerPoint. So we had the main PowerPoint output, and then we had the presenter view. We didn't include that on the program feed, but we did have to feed that to some confidence monitors. And then we also had presenters up on stage that would bring a laptop, and they'd be able to take whatever's on their laptop, and we'd be able to put it up on the screens as well. So quite a few different things there. In fact, we had one presenter who had dual outputs on their laptop, and so we had to be able to take two feeds from that laptop and be able to project that up on the screens that were there and be able to switch back and forth between that. There's some other curveballs that were thrown our way that we weren't necessarily expecting. Like, for example, the CEO of the company loved to do interactive things with the people that were there in attendance. And he'd always say, let's put 2 minutes on the clock and in order for you guys to get together and discuss things. And so what we intended to use only as a countdown timer for speakers ended up being a video source that we ended up using across the various projectors and LED wall to let people know how much time they had left for whatever activity that they were being asked to participate in. That we also ended up using that to let them know when the next session was going to begin. So we'd set a countdown to the scheduled time for the next session. And so a lot of things just sort of happening dynamically and changing real time on the fly. But it was a fun event to work, and technically kind of challenging in order to drive all the various screens and produce program output for the projectors and program recording as well. Now, this event actually had a decent budget behind it, but it wasn't quite enough to have all of the personnel on staff that we would have liked. It would have been really nice to add one or two more people, like one as kind of a runner to make sure that we're getting things shuffled around as needed, so memory cards and water and snacks and like whatever to keep the crew up and happy and have everything that they need. What would have been really nice for us to have a second person running a second program output. And the reason I say that is because when you're doing IMAG and you're also live streaming or recording at the same time, the needs of those are very, very different. So for IMAG, the people that are there in attendance in person, they can see both the presenter and the projection screens at the same time, right? So it's more important when you're doing IMAG only to make sure you're including a lot more of their presentation up on the projectors than you do necessarily of them talking, especially those who refer to their slides often, which we find is very often the case. Like, somebody takes the time to do a PowerPoint presentation, they're very often going to want to make sure that they're covering everything that's in that. However, for anybody who's watching remotely and for the recording, for anybody who's going to watch it later, you don't want to be staying on the slides for a super long time. it gets boring, it gets uninteresting. They want to be able to see the people that are talking a lot more than they see the slides. So you've got two very different needs here, and unfortunately a lot of clients don't understand that the recording that you're going to want to do, it needs to be very different than what you're going to be showing up on the projector screen. And that was the case with this event that we did. So unfortunately we were not able to budget an extra person to be able to switch those separately, and so we were having to basically run the same feed to the projectors that was going out to the live feed. And very soon after the event started, we get a phone call from someone who's watching the live stream, and they say, "You guys are showing the slides too much. You need to focus more on the people that are presenting." A few minutes later, we get a complaint from the people who are in attendance. "You guys are showing the presenter too much. You need to focus more on the slides." So what do you do? Well, we ended up coming up with a compromise. I spent a little less time on the slides for the recording, and a little bit more time on the presenter. So the recording actually was a little bit easier to watch, and made a little bit more sense and flowed a little bit better. But in an ideal situation, you would be producing two separate programs, and one of the ways to do that is to use a switcher that has two mixed effects engines, and that's one of the reasons I use the Constellation ME, a 2ME switcher. And one of the reasons I bought this switcher actually specifically is it has two MEs, two mixed effects engines, so you can produce two separate programs at the same time. Now, with that said, in this case, we actually needed to produce three programs if we were going to do this right. So we've got the one that's going to the live stream, we've got one that's going to the projectors, and then we've got one that's going to the LED wall behind the presenter. So in an ideal world, it would be nice to have a 3ME switcher to do that, but that's a lot of money for a fly pack that I don't necessarily use all the time, and so I make do with the 2ME switcher. And I want to focus on some of the techniques that you can use in this video in order to make that work out the best. Now, one thing that I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this video are going to suggest is that you just pick one of those and have that be fed by one of your auxiliary outputs on your switcher. And that absolutely can work, but the problem with doing that is you lose the ability to do any sort of overlays, to do any sort of transitions besides cuts, and so it isn't necessarily the best experience. So in this particular scenario, the most likely candidate for just using an aux output, in fact it actually was an aux output, wouldn't the LED wall. So whenever we needed to change up the image, we could just go into the auxiliary output on the switcher panel here and just change the source. But again, as mentioned, that means that it's changing as a cut, it's not dissolving, and there's no way we could have done some of the other things that we need to do, like putting up the clock on the screen as an overlay on top of the graphic that we had behind it. You can't do that on an auxiliary output. You need an ME, a mixed effects engine, in order to make that happen. Alright, I want to take a few minutes and talk about how I had things connected, how I things have wired up, and show you guys kind of the various outputs that would have been going on at any given point in time. It kind of is a simulation. Obviously, I'm not going to be showing you the actual video here, but I wanted to show you what we did in terms of how things were connected and how I ran the switcher panel here in order to get the closest we could, but given the budget constraints and the equipment that we had available to us in order to make that work. So let me come over here to this particular view here. So this is a multi-view output from the switcher, that's the Constellation switcher that's behind me. So in the upper left, that is ME output 1, so the main program output for the switcher, and that's what we use to drive the projectors there in the room. The upper right is going to be ME2, Mixed Effects Engine 2 program, and that's what we use to drive the LED wall behind the presenter. Alright, in the lower left, you're seeing the multi-view output of the switcher, and then in the lower right, this is where I wanted to deviate a little bit from what we did. So this is the clean feed 2 coming from the output of the switcher, and that would have been, in a more ideal world, that would have been our program output and the feed that drives the live stream. So in that case, I would have been able to create 3 different separate programs at the same time. So we had things set up like this. So ME1 was the one that's driving the projectors there in the room, and in this particular case it was also driving the live stream and the program recording that we delivered to the client. So it works pretty much like any other program that you're switching with a video switcher, in that you select your preview, select the preview source, and then you've got your program up here, and you can do your cuts and your dissolves between those various sources. So right now you can see that I've got my me on camera as the program output, and then I've got my PowerPoint slide, which is in this case a PowerPoint presentation that I did here on this channel a little while ago about IP networking, and I have that on preview. And then if I want to dissolve between those, I just hit the dissolve button. You can see that there it is. So in the upper left hand corner, that is going to be what actually was going out to the projectors there in the room. Okay, and that works just like it normally would, and that works really, really well. So in an ideal world, that would also be used to drive the live stream, and then I would deviate just a little bit, and I'll get to that here in a moment. Now I come up here to ME2 on the switcher, and this is what's driving the LED wall. So in this case, I've got Media Player 2 live, and I've got Media Player 1 on preview, and if I want to dissolve between those, I just hit the auto button on there, and that dissolves between those two different sources. And so what you're seeing there on the upper right hand corner of your screen is what's going up there on the LED wall. Now because it's an ME, it's a MixFX engine, I can do some other stuff on there as well. Say for example, if I want to include my timer on there, I can select key 1 and then dissolve that, and there now I have the timer overlaid on top of what's going on the LED wall. Similarly, I can come down here to ME1, and I've also got that same source set for the upstream key on there. And if I dissolve that, you can see that, hey, now the clock is overlaid. The timer clock is now overlaid on top of the other screen as well. Now, if I wanted to go and show the same background on these two projectors on the side, I can go to Media Player 2 and then dissolve that. And now there you go. So now we have the same thing going on both projectors and LED screen all at the same time. It's also going to the recording as well. So that works really, really well. And let's take that key back off again. If I hit auto button on both of those simultaneously, it comes off on both of them. And now if I want to dissolve back over to the camera, hit the background and then hit the auto button on there, and now the camera is now currently live on the two projector screens, and we've got our graphic without any overlay on the LED wall. Okay, now say we get to the point where we want to do video playback, and we want to do that on both screens. Select my video playback source, make sure I've got background selected on both ME1 and ME2, and then I hit the auto button. Both of them dissolve at the same screen at the same time, show the video, and then I can monitor the status of the video on my panel here. And then when it's time for the video to be over, I can hit the auto button there to dissolve back to what was currently live before, whether that be camera or PowerPoint or whatever. Okay, all right, so all that works really, really well, and it seems kind of overwhelming to see how many buttons are here, but in reality it's actually really not that hard. Once you've done it for a little while, you kind of stop thinking about it, and you just punch the buttons automatically as if you're on autopilot. So not that difficult to figure out. So now let's talk just a little bit about some of the philosophy behind producing a program that's for IMAG. And I'm going to go back to full screen on me here. So as mentioned earlier, like when you're producing IMAG, you are producing a program for people who are already there in person seeing what's going on. So you want to think a little bit differently about the way you produce that. So for example, as mentioned earlier, if someone's doing a PowerPoint, you're going to want to spend more time on that PowerPoint than you are on them, because you want the audience to be able to see the things that they're talking about. And again, they can always see the person that's currently talking, currently live. But the other thing you want to consider is that there are certain shots that maybe don't necessarily make a lot of sense in context of IMAG. For example, a wide angle establishing shot doesn't make a lot of sense on IMAG because it's showing the exact same thing that they're seeing with their eyes. So you probably want to stay on medium and tighter shots when you're doing IMAG. However, on the live stream, you probably do want to have some wide shots in there in order to show the establishing shot and let them see what's going on a wider view. Let them have context for the things that are going on. That's where having a switcher that allows you to do 3 MEs, or having someone running a separate switcher just for the live stream comes into play. There is kind of sort of a happy medium in there as well, and that's kind of where I wanted to focus on a lot of the stuff that I want to talk about in this video. And that's where we can use some of the existing features on the switcher in order to do kind of a hybrid. All right, so let me go back to this view right here. Okay, and actually let me go to this view right here. So you can see what I'm doing here on the panel. Now, one of the things I've done here is I have set up my PowerPoint presentation, the slides that are showing there, the IP networking. I've set that up as the source for downstream key 2 on my switcher. And then what I've done is I've taken the clean feed 2 output of my switcher and then routed that to one of the SDI outputs on my switcher, and then run that into a hyperdeck for recording, and also into a video encoder for live streaming. And what that allows me to do is to be able to replace the video source that's going to the program output by overlaying the downstream key on top of it. But because I have the clean feed feeding the recorder and the live stream, that downstream key is not included as part of that output, and so I can continue to switch video sources on the bus here while the PowerPoint is still going out to the projector. So let me even show you how this works. So as mentioned, I have the PowerPoint going to downstream key 2. So I hit downstream key 2 auto, and you can see there on the top of the screen that the PowerPoint is now showing up on the ME1 output, and therefore going to the projectors in the venue. However, I still have the ability to change the shot that's underneath that, and it's going to the clean feed. So if I want to, say for example, I don't know, go to the timer for whatever reason. So I can select the timer, put that there on the program bus, and then I want to maybe dissolve over to camera as the next shot. So I just cue up my camera there, and then I hit auto on there, and now it dissolves from the timer over to the camera, all while the PowerPoint is still there up on the projectors. And when it comes time to take that down off the projectors, all I have to do is come over here and hit downstream key auto 2, and then that dissolves off, and they're back to seeing whatever I had on program 1. So it's kind of a cool little hack there. It allows you to take a switcher, a 2ME switcher, and make it do more than maybe you'd think it could normally. So there's one little trick to doing this, and unfortunately I don't have a computer hooked up that I can actually demonstrate it, but I'll just very briefly describe what I did here. So downstream key 2, I set the fill on that one to be the PowerPoint, and I set the key to be the black video source, and then I inverted the key. So basically it gives a fully white key, therefore it makes the video source fully opaque, and therefore anytime I want to fade that on or off, I just hit downstream key auto, and then if I want to like do a cut away from that, I can just hit downstream to cut, and then that does that as well. Okay, so anyway, that's kind of the gist of it. We can use additional features on these switchers to do some things that you can't normally do. Now, I should mention that this feature only works with a downstream key. It doesn't work with an upstream key, and the reason for that is that there are a couple of taps in the video chain that allow you to extract the video before those downstream keys get applied, and that's what that clean feed feature is. And if that's something you're not familiar with, I do have a video about clean feeds here on the channel. So there you go. That's kind of a few ideas on how to take advantage of some of the stuff that's on a switcher that you might not necessarily think of otherwise, in order to make it do some things that maybe it wasn't necessarily designed to do, but can make your job a little bit easier and allow you to do some things that, hey, you might not have been able to figure out otherwise. So if you have any questions about any of this, you can certainly leave those in the comment section down below, or even better, join us over on my Discord server. You can go there, get there at djp.li/discord. It's a free service, doesn't cost anything. If you already have a Discord account, it's super easy, but if you don't have one, it's really easy to sign up and to get one. We've got a lot of people over there discussing video-related things, a very helpful community, and if you have a question or opinion or whatever, you can share that there on the server, and I'm sure you'll get a response from a lot of people in the community. So that's going to about do it for now. So thanks everybody for watching, and have a fantastic day.